What's up guys, welcome to today's video. Today we have another very tastefully done R31. So Chris's R31 here has come to us for a tune, and in the process we've sort of found a few things that we're going to change up a little bit. It's a fresh built motor by Chris, so it's always a bit risky for us with that, so we're trusting that Chris has done everything correctly. So he seems to pretty much know what's going on, so hopefully it's going to be okay. It's pretty much a faultless combo for an R31. We've got our Tara Racing 15-inch wheels. These wheels are awesome for these cars. They always look amazing. They're nicely priced, and they're just a really nice light, good quality wheel. So you know, it's that sort of once an RB style, and they just always set off these cars perfectly. So it's another one of those R31s that's had you know, a lot of attention to detail. It's very nice. I'll take you for a look around it. We've got a fresh bottom end, just a stock bottom end RB30 with a nice big, I'm pretty sure it's a Camtech 272 cam in it. It's quite a decent sized cam. We've got ourselves a GT3576 or 3582, sorry, rather, with 0.64 AR housing. So same turbo that we have on the R31 that we built earlier in the year, the other white one we did, but with a nice big cam in it. So it'd be interesting to see what sort of results we get out of this. He's got a forward facing plenum on here. Pretty sure they're SARD 800, around 800 or 600 cc injectors, so plenty enough for what we want to do on 98 fuel. So the car is powered by a Link G4x Atom, which was installed and wired in completely by our boys there at Whitey's Wiring, which have done an amazing job, so massive thank you to them. But it originally came to us, it hasn't been run yet because the boys had issues with the R31 Dizzy, or not so much the Dizzy as this thing has been converted to individual coil packs, but more so the cam angle sensor. So as these guys, a lot of R31ers know, they are problematic. They are known to have sort of some issues, the old R31 CAS. So we sort of talked to Chris about it, and we decided to go down the route of a decent trigger system. Now the new G4X range of Link, the processors in them are so fast that if you're relying on 3-decade-old optical triggers, you really aren't taking full advantage of what the ECU is capable of. So it is really in your best interest when you're running or spending this much money on a decent ECU setup to actually go for a good trigger setup, so that you've got a nice reliable trigger for your ECU, which is acting very quick. So we've got our complete Ross trigger kit to install in this car now, and then we're going to get it on the dyno for a run-in, and then ultimately after that we'll get a tune onto it and see what we can sort of push out of the big girl. Sorry guys, don't mind the plug lids all out and about, and our analog oil pressure gauge here. They're sort of just installed, well, the oil pressure gauge is installed because we'd have no other oil pressure gauge in the car and it hasn't been run before, so we're doing a run-in or first start. So very important for us to keep an eye on that fuel pressure, oil pressure rather, reliably for this first start. And I've just got the plug leads off because we're putting fresh plugs in it, because the plugs that are in it were a little bit too hot for me, for my liking, for how hard we want to push this car. So I went to a heat range colder plug. So, but don't let it take away from the fact that how well this engine bay has been done. A lot of attention to detail. It looks very reminiscent of some other 31s that I've seen. As you can see, completely shaved engine bay that's been repainted and smooth. We know exactly how much work this is. Sorry about the water, I just gave it a bit of a hose off because it was a bit dusty. But yeah, an incredible amount of work that goes into doing 31s like this, or any car like this for that matter. So we can very much appreciate how much work Chris has put into getting this car to where it is, and this engine bay is amazing. Very much enjoy this car. So Otaku Garage forward facing, big throttle body, Otaku Garage rail, like I said, SARD injectors. So all of the pieces of the puzzle are here for a nice reliable drift car, which is hopefully what we're going to do. So I'm going to get rid of this. This is a Dizzy that I tried. We tried a few of them, tried to get some nice reliable cam input signals, and we just couldn't get it going. So onto a good trigger setup. Should be much better for this car. Alrighty guys, and here we have, supplied by Chris, a complete Ross trigger kit, cam and crank trigger for the RB30. Now I know that people think this is a lot of money to be spending, but when it comes to spending decent money on a good ECU for your car, the ECU is only as good as the input signals it can read. So, you know, you can spend thousands and thousands of dollars on a good ECU for your car, but if you're still relying on those 30-year-old optical triggers, it's only going to be as good as the input signals that the ECU can read. So the ECU can only output from the data that's input, and the input data has to be reliable and safe. So this is definitely a good way to go as far as a reliable, good, safe setup. So very excited to be doing this, and hopefully we can get Chris to the track and have him a nice reliable car to get some seat time in. Righto guys, as simple as that. Our Ross trigger kit's all installed, all of the hardware is installed. That took less than 2 hours to actually install all that. Just like most other Ross products, everything bolted on perfectly, everything fit fine. Yeah, very, very simple, easy install. Unfortunately, I found that the water pump alternator belt that was supplied with the kit is not going to fit this setup. Bit of an odd one because the balancer we took off this car is actually 25% underdrive harmonic balancer, which we're actually going to be repurposing and using for Brad's R33.4 engine because it's still brand new. So that means the belt that was on it now is too short, and because the alternator pulley is too small, the belt that was supplied is too long. So we're going to have to source another belt on Monday, but it is what it is. So now that all the hardware is installed, we're getting on to wiring. So I'll take you through exactly how we're going to wire this thing up. So we've got here Whitey's perfectly beautiful new loom that's just been finished to install this Link G4x. So in the loom is the plug for the standard RB30 Dizzy, which is in obviously the CAS as well. So this plug actually incorporates a trigger as well as a home. So it is a 12 volt power, a signal earth, and it also has 2 signal wires in it. So we can use both of these signal wires for one for each of our signals that we're using, which makes things pretty easy. So what I've actually done is sourced from EFI Hardware the male end for that plug. So we've got here is our 4-pin male for that plug. So this is pretty much exactly what you would have on the distributor. So we're going to use this to make a subloom for our 2 cherry sensors. We're going to use a Deutsch plug just to separate the crank sensor from the cam. That way you can split them if ever you have to for any reason. So we're just going to make a nice little subloom that plugs directly into the loom that's already there, and will allow us to run both these triggers. So this could be done for just about any loom that's already been set up around a RB30 CAS or Dizzy, or even if you're using a plug and play ECU, you could pin this in the same way without having to do much loom modification. So while Rex sorts out the wiring for those sensors, I'm going to gap up our new plugs and install them so that they're ready to go. So for this setup, I'm running our trusty BCPR70S, or BKR70S. They're pretty similar plugs. So run these in a lot of things, generally pretty much just about every boosted Japanese car. Most of these cars they recommend a 6. As far as running any more than say sort of 12 PSI boost, I like to go to a heat range colder. That's just me as a tuner, that's what I like to do. Particularly on 98 fuel. So once you start pushing a little bit of boost, you're starting to get some higher intake temps, some higher cylinder pressure, higher cylinder combustion temps. You really want that colder heat range plug. So going for the 7s, going to gap them down to 0.8. 0.8 is where I want to go, just because we've got 6 LS coil packs in this thing, so we should have plenty good ignition, plenty of spark. If it was a single coil ignition, I'd be looking to gap them probably a little bit tighter, but for this thing, 0.8 should be great for the amount of boost we plan on running and what we want to do with this car. So these plugs from NGK that don't actually have a gap number at the end of the naming convention are actually supposed to be gapped 0.8 from out of the box, but it's always a good idea to check them as they go in. So you can see here the plugs that I'm taking out of it are a BCPR6ES11. So that 11 actually means they are a factory gap of 1.1 mil. So that is the naming convention for NGK. So 11 is 1.1, and then they have other ones like 13 to be 1.3 gap, etc, etc. The ones that don't have a gap number are supposed to be 0.8. Righto guys, my apologies. We ran out of time the other day, but we're back on the RB31 today. Just doing a few more things. We've finally got this trigger setup all sorted out and installed. I've spent this morning just getting a lot of the front end of the car back together. We've got the radiator and everything back in, fans are back in, plugged in. As you can see, our trigger setup's all installed. Beautiful. So I've just sort of tested out the trigger setup to make sure it's work. The Link have this great feature where they actually have a built-in oscilloscope, so you can actually check all your trigger signals. So that is just up here. Ooh, you can see there I've done a trigger scope. You can see that the top there, the trigger signal, we've got 12 teeth, which is beautiful. And on the bottom we've got our home tooth, which is working great. Up here to ECU controls. You can go down there to trigger scope. You can actually run a trigger scope with the built-in oscilloscope, which is extremely handy for fault finding. It's great. It's a really good feature that the Link has. So when Chris gave us the trigger setup, it actually came with new belts, obviously because it comes with a new balancer. I'm not sure if that actually comes with the kit or whether Chris got them for us. I'm not 100% sure. So when the car was originally dropped off to us to, be tuned, it didn't have a power steering belt on it at all. He hadn't sorted out the power steering at all, but when he gave the trigger kit to us, he gave us a power steering belt as well. So he also gave us some nice power steering fluid. So I've topped up his power steering fluid, ready for the belt. Unfortunately, the water pump alternator belt that he gave us is a little bit too big. So Rex has just gone for a parts run to get a new belt for it, so that we've got a belt to chuck on it so that we can get this thing onto the dyno today. Apart from that, while I've been waiting for Rex, I've just been going over the car, fixing up a few things, tidying up a few things, zip tying up a few things. I did notice that his Mac valve was plumbed a bit, not the way I like to have it. Mac valves are a funny thing because depending on how you set up the duty cycle table, you can almost have them plumbed in any way you want. But the way I like to set it up, I like to have the reference to the common port and then the normally closed port to the gate. I also noticed on his wastegate, it's a Turbo Smart gate. I'm not actually sure exactly what generation or what it actually is. It's got a bottom port and a top port. He did have a bung in the top port on the top side of the diaphragm. So just there in that hole on the top side, there was this stainless steel bung. And I've had a feel around the whole gate, and those are the only two ports, which means that is the only port on the top. If there's only one port like that, you can't bung it up because you need, all you're doing is locking that diaphragm without giving air any room to escape. That diaphragm's not going to be able to open. So it's pretty important that you at least have one port that's open. What I generally recommend is to turn the open port so that it's facing down, so that if you do get condensation or anything inside the gate, it's going to drain out. So I'll make that recommendation to Chris to probably take the top off that gate and rotate it so that that port's facing down, so that water can drain out of it, or condensation. But it was a bit scary, because this bung that he had in it was a stainless bung, and it started to bind up as soon as I tried to get it out. So that was terrifying. I just had to get some CRC on it and just really slowly work it out, ever so slowly, and it did come out. So that had me terrified for a while, because that would have been a very bad situation. Just double check what outputs are like things like our Mac valve and everything are plumbed into, and make sure they're wired up and are actually working on the outputs that they're configured in the ECU. I'll just go through and do all that. And then as soon as Rex gets back with this belt, set the timing on these triggers, and then we should be good to fire up and get it on the dyno and start running it in. So fingers crossed it's all good. Righto guys, so Rex is back now. We've just set the timing. We've got a belt that's going to fit, which is awesome. As expected with cars that come from our boys there at Whitey's Wiring, everything worked. All the outputs were pinned correctly. All of the outputs were configured correctly in the ECU. Everything's Mickey Mouse. So this thing's pretty much at this point ready to fire up. I'll put the camera down and film this first start, because I'm pretty sure Chris has never heard this thing running, because I don't think it's ever run since he built it. So this will be fun. she runs awesome, very well done. Awesome oil pressure, came straight up to 60 PSI, which is awesome for a 30, so that's all good news. Everything's great. So you would have heard it stumbling and carrying on. That's actually nothing to do with the engine. That was just that the ECU was going from, it was sitting at like 1000 RPM, then dropping back to 0, and it kept dropping up and back to 0. So obviously I've set the air gap on that cam trigger probably just a little bit loose. So we're gonna have to pull that off, reset the air gap, and hopefully that sorts out the ECU so that it doesn't must be missing every now and then and thinking it's doing 0 RPM. So we'll sort that out now, tighten up that air gap a bit, and after that we should be right. So while we do that, I'll put the belts on. Obviously it's running, it's got oil pressure, so shut the belts on now, and then we'll get it running again and get it on this dyno. So guys, the mighty, beautiful R31 finally lives. So well done to Chris. Big thank you to Sam for wiring it all up. Everything seems to be working great. So at this stage, just from a little bit of running in, I was hoping to get some footage, but I've had to can it at the moment because it's starting to get a bit late anyway. But so far so good, makes really good oil pressure. Engine seems to be healthy enough. Biggest issue we've had is it's still breaking up, it's still losing those counts, so we still need to tighten up the air gap on the cam trigger. That still needs to be tightened up a little bit. The problem with it is it's very hard to measure because it's encased in the Ross, in the housing there. So it is actually very hard to measure the distance from the edge of where the actual sensor bolts in through to the tooth. Originally it was a little bit loose, we've tightened it up a little bit, and it's still doing the same thing where it seems to be missing some counts. So we're gonna have to sort that out. Then the other issue we've had is these cheap eBay thermo fans. We sort of already preempted that this was going to be an issue. The same thermos that I tried to put on my 31 when I first built it, they didn't work. Same thermos that Adam tried to put on his Cressida when he first built it, they didn't work. They just don't work, particularly not with a shroud. The thing with the RB30s, I'm sure Chris would have had the exact same problem I had, where with a shroud they actually foul in the power steering pump. So you can't put a shroud on them. The fans just simply do not move enough air. They just don't do it. This thing is getting hot. I've managed to get 2 heat cycles in, but it takes literally all of about 3-4 minutes when it's under load to get up to about 95 degrees. So just does not work. You need to either spend like a good amount of money on some decent thermos, or as I said to Chris, with the old RB30 here, we've just found that the best solution is just to stick with an engine fan. You know, good quality thermos is obviously a really good idea. It's just that, you know, to pay for a spare thermo, you pay a lot of money. So we already preempted this was going to be an issue, and Chris actually gave us the shroud and engine fan off this car because we sort of knew that this was going to be a problem. So over the weekend, we'll tighten up those air gaps, whack the fan and shroud back on. Hopefully by Monday we should be able to actually get a tune on this car. I just really wanted to get it running today and up on the dyno and get a little bit of the run-in done, so that I have something to tell Chris, because the car's been here for quite a while we've been waiting to do that trigger system, and then we've had other jobs to work it in because we couldn't do it when it was booked in for. So it's been here a while. Chris has been very patient. He's a really cool dude, so wanted to give him something to, you know, tell him something this weekend and make sure his engine was okay. So everything so far so good. Anyway guys, that's going to be the end of this one. On Monday I'll continue this run-in, get it completely bedded in to the point where I'm happy. We'll then do the same thing where we sort of drop the run-in oil, put some decent oil back in it before we start loading it up properly, and we'll tune back in on the next video when we're actually starting to get a tune on this thing, so see what we can push it to. Anyway, thanks for watching guys. Smash like, smash subscribe. If you want to support the channel, head to the online store. I'll leave a link in the description. You can go buy yourself a shirt or a sticker or something. That goes a long way for us, so we do appreciate it. So thanks for watching guys. Peace out. See you, bye.